Welcome to the Work Awesome Podcast. This is episode 4, How to Build Your Network During a Pandemic. Today I have Tara, Christina, who is actually not an AVIAN employee. So this is a first time for the podcast. Very exciting. We'll let her introduce herself in a second. And Sarah is with us. So let's just jump into those background descriptions. Tara, do you want to start with kind of what you do for AVIAN and just an overview of what your day-to-day might be?
Oh, day-to-day. You threw that one at me.
Well, all right. Maybe not day-to-day. Maybe just a background.
Would you like a podcast about my day-to-day?
No. Hold on a second.
So I'm Tara Strickland. I'm the Director of Communications at AVIAN, and I focus on internal and external communications for our company. When I started here almost 10 years ago, I was doing direct communication support for a specific contract on the local base here in the Pax River area, and then I kind of transitioned to the corporate side of the house. So on the day-to-day basis, there's no telling what internal or external communication needs we might have. So that's what's exciting about it, is that there's always something different.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have said day to day now that I think about that, because it is. I obviously am on Tara's team, and days are never the same.
No, even when you plan it to be more organized in a structure of what you're going to do.
Then someone just throws a wrench and, you have to change everything. I need to scoot in. So while I do that, Christina, do you want to give a little bit of background about yourself and the type of position you have for WBB?
Yeah, I did not realize I was the first non-AVIAN guest here, so This is very exciting. I am a program management consultant with WBB. I started there about 9 years ago, which makes me probably a terrible millennial.
Me too.
Right?
I'm right there with you.
I know. It's when you find a good company, right?
Sorry, Sarah.
But WBB, if you aren't aware, we just acquired 2 companies about a year ago. So we've doubled our employee workforce. So we're up to like 1,000 people right now. And we focus on program management, acquisition, mission performance, data analytics, and machine learning. So we have a couple of really new and really interesting things that I don't know anything about. So I focus on that program management and acquisition side. But I think really what you guys have me here for is the fact that I run St. Mary's Young Professionals and am part of Leadership Southern Maryland and their development of their Emerging Leaders program. So I think that's probably where we're going to focus a little bit more today.
Yeah, exactly where we're going to focus. So thank you for that, guys. Sarah, you've given your background before, so we're not going to do it this time. Same with me. You've heard my background a lot.
If not, watch the other podcasts.
Yeah, definitely. Probably episode 1 of this season has all of that information. So this episode, we are focusing on networking during a pandemic. The days of handshaking, quick chatting, in-person networking are gone for now. Building our network during a pandemic can be a challenge, but it's not something you want to slack on, especially if you're setting yourself up for your next career change. In this episode, we'll discuss ways you can continue to build your network even during a worldwide pandemic. So let's jump into this. I didn't, and I think I warned you guys, I didn't write down many questions for this. So hopefully this conversation goes swimmingly, because you guys are chatty, which is not a bad thing.
About this particular topic,
I was going to say that's why we are actually here, the whole networking piece, right?
Invited us.
So let's talk first about, and since it's a common theme between Tara and Christina, Leadership Southern Maryland. So and there are other programs, Leadership Southern Maryland. I don't know enough about the actual background of it, so I'll leave that to you guys. But I do want to say that there's a Leadership Maryland, which is the entire state of Maryland. And I've also seen Leadership Frederick, which probably is very similar to Leadership Southern Maryland. So I'll let you guys, like I said, describe what that is right now.
Since you are a graduate and I am yet to be a graduate, would you like to kind of take that
We'll
one?
be the best class ever till you guys become the best. No, we ended up being the booziest class ever. So I don't know if that's something I really...
Sounds like the best class to me.
Right? No, so Leadership Southern Maryland has been, I think we're on year 12. And I'm actually part of the board as well. So that has been really interesting. I graduated in 2019. And the goal of the program really is not necessarily to develop leaders. That's part of the Emerging Leaders program. I think what we're talking about more is the executive program. But the goal is to have leaders in Southern Maryland, in the Tri-County region, whether you work or live here, come together to take your leadership experiences, meet a new group of people who have different backgrounds but similar leadership experiences, and be able to focus on the different industries in the area, the different problem sets that are in the area, and leverage your network to be able to make a difference or identify where those changes can and should be happening. So it's really taking kind of those leadership skills and making your community a better place.
Yeah, so I'm about halfway through the 2020 class of Leadership Southern Maryland, and it's been interesting because we started in a pandemic. I applied for it in last April, and going into kind of just jumping right into the topic here, the idea of networking within a pandemic it's tricky, but a program like Leadership Southern Maryland, which pre-pandemic was you're touring different facilities of water treatment and law enforcement areas and healthcare, and you're seeing what they're really doing for the community and how you can be a part of it. How do you do that within a pandemic? And then how do you actually network with people within that? What's really great about that particular program is that you can network with people that you may never otherwise really interact with. And some of my closest connections, the people that I enjoy meeting with so far in there, are people that are in completely different industries.
Right.
The people that
never would have met them before.
Never.
I mean, I think out of our class, my really close friends group is probably 75% LSM graduates, which is shocking because there's such a wide swath of people who actually, take part in the program. But they're some of my best friends. They're not just my network, right? We can tap into the entire 300 and some person network, right? But it becomes a lot more because of the authenticity I think that you have to have. And that's probably some more discussion that we're going to end up getting into from a networking perspective. But having that authenticity and the vulnerability that Leadership Southern Maryland kind of foists upon you, because you're talking about really challenging subjects. You're talking about poverty. You're talking about inequality. You're talking about diversity.
we just did Diversity Day last
right?
week, and talk about crazy
I
topics.
mean, everybody cries. It's great. So how do you not bond with people who have those similar, more vulnerable experiences with you? I'm interested a little bit to hear about how different your Diversity Day was from a virtual kind of perspective.
Well,
or were you guys in person?
We were actually in person for that one.
Okay,
We've had 3 that are in person and 2 that are
that's
virtual.
Right. That's right.
But from a networking standpoint, it's whether we're in person, which then when you're networking like that with large groups of people, forcing yourself. I'm an introvert. It's weird because I'm the director of communications here, and it's.
I think all of us on the team are introverts, which is weird, but
somebody said something, I want to say it was my LSM facilitator, and there's a type of introvert. Was it you, Sarah? I don't know. Maybe it's part of Myers-Briggs, but look, I'm bouncing
somewhere.
Bouncing all around.
It's all good.
But
you did have coffee this morning.
I
so,
did.
Yeah.
I don't normally have a lot. But no, it's the idea that you can be an introvert, but then still in certain situations be very, very extroverted. But so forcing yourself to go to those other tables, forcing yourself to apply to programs where the purpose of it is like other people that are going to those programs also want to network.
And it's scary enough. I mean, I remember my first day of LSM, so I'm a little bit on the less experienced side of the typical LSM candidate. So I knew one of my classmates, and the first day I'm like, well, we're definitely sitting.
Right.
Like, we're sitting together because I don't know any of these people. Our experiences are so different. I don't know how to kind of bridge that gap. And I'm not like inept at communicating. And it still was really challenging, even in person, to go and take that leap and to network with people who you may be intimidated by or may view as a mentor versus a peer. Mm-hmm. And I think that that holds true kind of for probably the remainder of this conversation is, taking that scariness out of it, and how do you just go do it, right?
Yep.
And it was a big thing I had to force myself to go do just because it was a different environment.
Well, and I feel like we will loop back around to Leadership Southern Maryland, but I recently participated in another virtual conference of something that is normally in person, and it's about employee ownership, ESOP companies, employee stock ownership plan companies, and it's just a matter of utilizing within those chat features in the virtual meetings, doing direct messages to people. I didn't know half of the people that were on this call, but when they had something really great to say that was value added for me, I made a point to specifically reach out to them to say, thank you so much, Mary, that was really helpful to me. Could I come back to you with additional questions? And really just opening up that channel of communication, because otherwise, if I don't, then I leave it out there and I miss that opportunity to connect.
So let's go off of that point. Do you guys think it's easier to, and we will circle back to Leadership Southern Maryland, do you think it's easier to network virtually or in person? Because you do. So emails are much easier to write than like going and talking to somebody face to face.
Kind of. But, you find that, like, or at least I find, I won't speak for everybody, but I find that I curate too much in something written. For me personally, I like to, if I have something written down, I want to make sure that it is exactly the words that I am looking for with the intent that I have behind it. And it takes so much mental effort for me to craft a good email. Like, I don't just like shoot emails off and be like, hey, do you want to chat? Like, I like to have a plan. I like to have all of that together. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's a lot more challenging for me to direct message somebody than it is for me to go and chat with them. Mm-hmm. Like having a beer in your hand and being able to strike up a conversation and frame it in more of a personalized sense in person, for me is a lot easier just because I am an extrovert and I like the inner personalities and, how to, just finding out about people as humans. Yeah. And it's much harder for me to get that vibe and to get that connection, which is what I care about in networking.
That, and there's also that opportunity that, you send the email, they don't respond.
Right.
And unless you're adding the read receipt, you don't even know if they read the email. So getting, like you're saying, getting that face-to-face may be easier. And to tie this into recruiting a little bit, Sarah, do you want to talk about the virtual job fairs that you've done and how that has kind of changed
the networking aspects there?
It's definitely different. So the nice thing a lot of times is that people tend to submit their resumes in advance. So we have that kind of to look at, in our platform while we're talking to the candidate. But I think we've done enough to see several different formats now, and it really depends on the format. So sometimes the problem is that I'm chatting with 7 or 8 candidates at the same time, so I don't have that. You don't get that
one-on-one is a little different.
Yes, one-on-one is very different because. So if you're at a large room and there are several tables, you can kind of go to the tables that have less people. You see that someone's interacting, and you might kind of join in that interaction, or you might wait. When someone's interacting with me online, they don't necessarily know if other people are chatting with me.
Right.
They don't know they don't even really know if I'm actually
a person
legitimately online. Yeah, exactly.
A bot.
So I think you miss that kind of that personality, that exchange. It is nice because I think there are several people who maybe are a little bit more on the shy side and aren't real comfortable going to those job fairs. So there are some nice things. And I think, locality, like maybe someone's out of town that day, they normally wouldn't be able to go, but now they can just log in. So there are some nice parts of it, and organizations have done a great job of trying to make things as interactive and as value added as possible. If I had a choice between going to either, I would go to in-person career fair.
But I'm
or
sure
networking
there are aspects of the virtual job fairs that maybe didn't even exist before the pandemic. There's a lot of things, and actually we're going to be talking about that in a different podcast. Technologies that didn't exist before the pandemic that are now part of just our everyday lives, and it makes so much sense. And you're like, why didn't we have this before? The example that I always like to use, I'll let you go in just a second, is like Microsoft Teams. It stunk before the pandemic. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, everyone's working at home. They need a way to communicate. They're pushing updates like every single day. So huge technology because of the pandemic. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, well, and I was going to say, if I'm on a virtual job fair, I can push a link to a job immediately instead of just having a paper copy or saying, go to my website or, that kind of thing. So there is that immediate access to the technology that can make it really nice. Yeah. And like I said, I can pull up their resume right there. So it's a little less awkward in that case, but it's just not the same as having that eye-to-eye contact and getting to engage.
Right.
I will say, so one of the really great things, Sarah, I'm sure for the people who are interviewing with you or who are talking to you, is that I've found, if I'm speaking or I have a presentation, it's so nice to be able to be looking at my camera, but also have like my prompts on the screen. So I feel a lot more confident when I'm presenting and you don't look like you're fumbling around, or you have some like pre-written answers or things like that. So I am sure that, from people who are talking to you from like an interview perspective or from a recruitment perspective, you end up probably getting a better experience because people are less nervous.
You take out all of those things that in-person interview might, or even again, just general networking, those sweaty palm kind of moments where
I think it makes people a little bit more confident in those engagements.
They can't smell my breath. I had coffee this morning. And,
that going to a weird place that you've never been before, like sitting down in our lobby for 10 minutes, not saying waiting for Sarah, but like waiting for their time to come. There's definitely things that
we're
taken out of the equation. The flexibility.
You can literally have an interview during your lunch and not interrupt your day as much. Yeah. So I think that's nice. Now, I think I've talked in the past, not being able to show off our space and really engage with as many people.
Virtual tour.
Well, but there is an aspect of it that from a, it's still two-dimensional. It's not,
absolutely.
You're not getting everything, but when we're talking about benefits to different personality types or different types of people, when you can reduce some of those nervous aspects for people, you maybe get and hear things that you wouldn't otherwise. And I was talking to someone recently about, in large meetings, you tend to hear the most gregarious sometimes, the people that very much or they're not afraid to speak up. And the introverts kind of just sit there. They're like, oh, maybe my question will be answered, or maybe I'll talk to them offline afterwards. And in a conference, in a virtual conference, you very easily can ask your question. You can raise your hand. You can have your time to speak, and people respect that. It's just a different dynamic, and it provides more opportunities, I think, for different types of people and how they want to interact.
Yeah, and you have that the opportunity to type your message, your question. There's some people that don't like speaking in front of large audiences.
But they're like, I'll definitely type this question in there.
Yeah. So there's, again, going back to technology, people are just using it differently now, which I don't think is a bad thing. So let's get back to
location. Even talking just networking. So, I've been able to do a little bit more connecting with people who are not living in Maryland anymore that have been friends for years. We have a virtual book club. And so that's a great way for me to stay connected to people that maybe aren't in our, immediate location. But any networking is good networking, right?
Well, and you know what, Sarah? So it's so funny you mention that, because it's not like we didn't have the ability to do this before. We just didn't use it.
We just didn't. No.
And it's really created much more connectivity from a geographic perspective, which I think was one of the things that, I was thinking about coming into, hey, how are we talking about networking? And, how can you do that better right now? And I think it's changed the way, or will change the way, that we do networking in perpetuity, because we don't have geographic barriers anymore.
Yes.
Right? If I decide that I use this pandemic time to reformulate my career, figure out what my real passions are, and I'm going to go, I don't know, I want to go do communications, right? Then it opens up an entire world of new mentors, of new jobs, especially as things kind of get more virtual generally. I think that taking away of the geographic barriers mentally has been and will be really important from a, like a relationship building standpoint versus networking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it probably deserves a little bit of a conversation on networking versus kind of that relationship building too, but yeah.
Yeah, you actually hit one of the points that I actually wrote down. So rethinking that geographic boundary and just, like you said, thinking about it differently now. Let's segue into that question. What types of changes did you see in networking events because of the pandemic? And we can tie it directly back to Leadership Southern Maryland, where all of Christina's was in person, whereas yours was kind of hybrid, I would say.
Yeah.
There are times where you had to do things virtually, but you are now shifting back to doing more in-person stuff.
Well, yeah, even the kickoff event. So the kickoff event is 2 days, and everybody's supposed to be in there. It's very immersive, and there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of relationship building with your group, so that once you establish a relationship and then carry that through for your entire year-long program. But starting it all masked, having to keep your distance changes the dynamic. You have panels of commissioners coming in where it just changes the entire setup of what you're trying to do, and then creates this challenge where you want to connect with people, but there's a little bit of fear in there. There's a little bit of okay. So some people may perceive that as being standoffish because you don't want to connect, when really it's just, I'd prefer to, keep our distance
a little bit.
So that made it a little bit more difficult, because after each of these sessions, there's supposed to be some sort of kind of after hours.
Right.
And some of the best relationships can be formed in those after hour events, whether you're drinking or not, whether you just kind of hang out afterward. And it's been a little bit more challenging for us to...
I can imagine that, yeah, for sure. Because I think for us, the after hours were definitely where we solidified the friendships. We talked about the day, because you're still kind of in a class, right? So by the time you're at the end of it, you're like, okay, well, here are like the lessons that we learned today. Here are the things that we did. You do your little recap. But then you get into a lot more of that nuanced discussion afterwards. And, we're seeing it from the Southern Maryland Young Professionals standpoint too, where you don't necessarily have an opportunity to, to brainstorm with other people, to talk things through with other people as much anymore in an area that's not public. Right. If you're doing this on a Zoom call, or if you're doing this on Teams, I know it tells you when it's recorded, but you're putting yourself out there in a much more formal environment where, you don't get that opportunity to just be like, well, here's kind of what I think.
Yeah.
And it's more of a like a safer space to have those discussions with people that you trust, or with people that you're building trust with.
Yeah.
Sarah, any changes, I guess, that you saw because of the pandemic?
Well, some of the...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you talked about a little bit about the virtual job fairs. Is there anything else on, I guess, like the interview side? And we did touch on this a little bit, but any bigger things that you saw because of the pandemic?
So some of the other, standard networking events that we would go to have just kind of either stopped. Most of them have just stopped. And, sometimes whereas businesses, I think, have done a great job of really utilizing their tools to keep things going virtually. Some organizations just don't have the infrastructure to do that.
Yep.
So I have missed, meeting candidates in those ways, but whereas maybe some of those things have kind of stopped, some other agencies like our Tri-County, our local agency, has done a great job of really thinking outside the box and having events that they haven't had in the past, and ways to connect with. I think their employees are working double and triple time, because I've just seen some amazing things that they've done, which and any of those agencies are a great way to network and they're really aware of the resources in the county. And I'm hoping that as we start to open up a little bit more, we keep some of these virtual skills that we've learned and expand on those and go back to the in-person as well. And I think I've seen, different activity on some of the social media platforms, maybe because that's how people are connecting. LinkedIn, Tara, I attended a training a couple weeks ago, and that was a big push afterwards. I mean, we're all virtual, and, now we have connections on LinkedIn. So that's a great way to keep your network expanding, some of those kind of things.
That's definitely one of the things that, like we talked about before, we did these things before, but it's changed because of then the landscape of that then becomes one of your only ways to really connect with those individuals. So you attend a virtual conference and then, or a class, a certification, you then connect with those people on LinkedIn, and you just kind of start to build your relationship there and see how that goes. And then you've established that, so then you could go into the direct messaging if you want to or need to and find those synergies. The social media comment that you said kind of took my brain in a completely different direction, and it led me to Southern Maryland is Hungry. And so from a networking standpoint, thinking about how food connects us as communities, and the purpose of that was to show what businesses were open, what they were offering, how can we support them through this pandemic, and it really, I think, started so organically, so beautifully, and now there's thousands and thousands of people that are part of that group. And I wonder then how many connections and how many other ways that people have connected through that, where people are messaging each other about the food, and oh my gosh, that looks so great, and can you tell me more about that and your experience? And so what started as food has now turned into networking opportunity.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this video on YouTube. I just want to jump in and say that if you are not following the Work Awesome Network on all social media platforms, I highly encourage that. It's the place to get updates on blog posts, on new episodes, on basically anything related to the Work Awesome Network. So jump over to wherever you get your content from: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on all the platforms. If you are interested, we also publish these same episodes on audio platforms, so you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and pretty much anywhere you get your podcast. So if you would rather listen to this in an audio format in the car, on the way to work, in the office, I encourage you to jump over to those audio platforms and listen there. I also want to say, if you're interested in learning about the company behind the Work Awesome Network, AVIAN, you can jump over to the AVIAN website at avian.com, AVIAN.com. Thanks again for watching this video. Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. It helps the video out. It helps it get in front of more people. Thank you again, and now back to this episode.
So your comment about food bringing everybody together and networking and kind of that community aspect, it's funny because we had somebody in our neighborhood who was organized. She was like the single point of contact for all of the food trucks. We had a food truck probably once a week, once every other week at a minimum. And it was so nice to see people actually out together. Before the pandemic, but I mean, we would never have had that big community feel. And I think it took, there are two ways to look at it, right? So the pandemic took our ability to look really global and made everything accessible, but also brought our focus really, really into kind of the
what's
that
immediately
micro
in front of you,
and what's in your community, and how can you bring your neighborhood together, let alone your county or your work or whatever. So I think that's a great example of kind of bringing the community organically sort of together.
Yes, and then just from that, because of small talk is what it is, then it's like, oh, well, where do you work, and how do you?
You would never have met these people otherwise.
You've never met these people, and maybe they become a mentor for you. Maybe you find a new opportunity and change jobs. Like we had something very similar in our neighborhood, and It is like that. That's really something that I very much enjoyed. In the height of that, it was that high point of what sometimes is a very long day with two small kids, where it's like, okay, we're gonna go walk and we're gonna go get tacos, and just see other people and talk to them.
So the other part of this question, we're still on the what types of changes did you see? That's
We got
like I said,
real off on that.
the
I
one
guess.
the one question I actually wrote down. Have you guys noticed more participation from senior leaders? So I can speak specifically to AVIAN. Before the pandemic, we weren't getting these. They were almost at one time weekly updates from Kevin. Kevin being the CEO of AVIAN. It was just reassuring, nice to see that message come out every week. And now it has slowed down a little bit, but I still think it's very valuable when you see that message pop up and see Kevin's face, because they are video messages. It just adds a little bit of, he does know and understand, and he's paying attention to what's going on. Even just regular meetings outside of those messages that get sent. I think there's more participation from VP level folks that understand that now they can be in a meeting, hear what's going on, but potentially still work on some other stuff on the side. So any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I think that what Kevin did for the pandemic updates, the COVID updates that he was releasing, which again, like you said, was just very casual, informal. Hey, hope you guys are doing well. Here's something going on in my world. It made him very accessible. It made him more approachable to then say, I would really enjoy a conversation with you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And in an email where you craft it perfectly and hope to get the message exactly right, while that is still a really great form of communication, there's something about that video that just allows you to connect with someone a little bit more. And Teams as well, because everybody is up, we know that people are up. I think that's kind of what you were just saying, where there's a little bit more multitasking going on, but the tool allows you to then, maybe I'm not communicating all the time with this particular senior leader or even somebody else within the organization, but I send them a direct message through Teams instead of an email. Yep. And we end up having a really great dialogue through that we would have never had through email.
Yeah, I think it's opened up a lot of means of communication that we wouldn't have thought about before. I mean, I direct message people all the time now. It has uncluttered my mailbox.
Yes.
It means you get to have like fun conversations about whatever else is going on.
Yep.
It's made my meetings more effective, because if you have a meeting with a customer and then you have a separate discussion with your teammates, so from a consulting perspective, right? We're like, hey, did you catch that? Do you understand what they meant by this? And you can kind of clarify things a little bit off to the side. You're more effective.
Yeah.
But kind of back to your point from, hey, is leadership more engaged? I think they have to be.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's an option. I mean, your company, you guys are very organic. Kevin's always very involved.
Yes.
And for us, we grew over the last year. So we had just doubled in size 3 months before this happened. So we were still transitioning people into the company. People were still learning about our culture. Then all of this happens. Yeah. So we've had a lot of interactions with our senior leadership, and it's been great to have more awareness. I think it takes more of a conscious effort, though. So I see some places where it has been extremely successful, where it's, hey, I'm going to just like CC these people. It's not like CCing them or inviting them to a meeting because, oh, I need some supervision here. Right. I need some backup, right? It's very much an information sharing and inviting more of an audience. And I think it's taken people a while to realize that, yeah, just because your VP's in the meeting doesn't mean that you have to stifle your conversation or be less real. And I think it has led a lot to the humanizing of leadership, just like you were saying, right? Is, like your dog's going to bark in the background or your baby's crying or whatever, and everybody's a person.
Yes.
And it's really brought that to the forefront, especially for leadership. I mean, not really with WB or probably AVIAN, but maybe some like much larger companies really done that humanization aspect.
Yeah, or even the Navy. I mean, I'm seeing a lot more videos from admirals that you may not have seen before. So just they really took the leap and said, all right, we're going to go all in on this video content and push this out to our workforce, because really that's the only way that they could communicate at the time. It looks like we lost Sarah, which,
bye, Sarah.
Yeah, she had to go to another meeting. So that's all good. So let's continue with the last couple points I have. The cost of networking events. So now most conferences are like
Super cheap.
Yep.
either super cheap or free altogether.
Yeah.
You don't have to travel to them anymore. They're all hosted virtually. Well, most of them are hosted virtually. So there's a lot of cost savings there. I know you talked about the ESOP conference. What was that experience like?
So they, because that particular type of conference, I think thrives off of more small groups that can kind of get together, you give a presentation, and then people kind of talk about their own ESOPs. They did a few sessions where they still did that. But I chose to participate in a roundtable discussion, which I thought was really effective, specifically about communications around employee-owned companies. And yeah, it was just a very minimal cost so that they can run their actual meeting, and then it was all through Zoom. So everybody, I think, felt comfortable with that platform. Yeah. Everybody was able to connect easily. So I'm going to another one this Friday that is a kind of an all-day kind of thing. This roundtable is only 2 hours, so I'm interested to see how that one goes.
Was going to be another point that, like I just mentioned about senior level leaders being able to multitask. Now you can sit at home or sit at your desk and kind of, yes, participate in this conference, but still get some work done in those breaks or even during some of the sessions as well.
Yeah, I mean, so there was, and I am not in HR, but for WBB, I've been involved in a lot of things for employee engagement, for, starting up a mentorship program, and kind of more of those employee-focused things, because I really like it, right? Yeah. So I randomly saw on LinkedIn that one of my tangential acquaintances had registered for this Hacking HR conference, which I didn't realize was as big of a deal as it is, because it's a pretty big deal. And I was able to sign up for free as a non-HR professional. Right. I chose to attend 2 sessions for the first day because they talked about employee engagement and it talked about, corporate culture and things like that. And I didn't have to pay for the whole thing. I just sat in the things that I wanted to hear, but I would never have found out about it, and I would never have considered going to it before the pandemic.
Because you're like, all these things, they don't apply to me.
They don't. I don't do HR. Yeah. That's not a thing that on the whole applies to my job, but these other specific things really do, especially for the community engagement piece and all of that.
So maybe tailoring those events now is easier, so you can pick and choose what you attend rather than spend the money to travel to wherever, have a hotel, and then you feel like you have to participate in the entire thing.
And they record them too.
Yes.
So we're talking about networking and the recording aspect, and the virtual piece of that is, it's a little counter to, I think, what this discussion is. But from an access to information standpoint, I think that having things being able to be recorded and accessible has made a big difference, especially for people who, are looking to maybe change their careers or get into different fields or just learn more about something different without having to, take PTO to go do it. Yeah.
Any last minute tips? I feel like we need to wrap this up because, like you said, we could probably talk for a long time about this topic. And I feel like, Tara, every time you're on, we say that, and maybe it's just the topics that you happen to be on.
I just talk a lot.
You invited both of us. Yeah, this is what you get.
I just keep having different thoughts, and I'll try and keep this one short, but I think about different tips, different things that I do, even with our virtual onboarding. Yeah. So I am part of our onboarding team, and I introduce people to the company when they join, and through our virtual onboarding, we encourage people to use their video cameras. And yesterday, one of our new hires had her video camera on. So I was able to see all the wonderful things behind her. And while I think that the virtual backgrounds that we can select are great, if you create a beautiful, kind of something like this.
You mean where the neon sign is supposed to be?
I think that's great. But what I really love is to be able to actually connect with people through what they have behind them.
Yes.
So this particular person is a retired military, and she had a lot of really great Navy memorabilia behind her. And I'm like, that is a great way to virtually connect with somebody. If they were coming into the office and doing onboarding in one of our conference rooms, I would not have the opportunity to say, hey, tell me about that behind you. That's really cool. Right. And then you just start to have those moments where you're building a relationship with somebody in a way you wouldn't have been able to before.
Yeah. And along the same lines, and sorry to pull up the curtain, we don't record these in order and we record them ahead of time. We just did an episode with one of our employees who is, or he was a Marine. I guess you're always a Marine.
Always a Marine.
And he had all of his patches on the back of his chair. So along that same line, I'm like, those are really cool. Tell me about those patches that you have on the chair. So yeah, definitely, it's cool to see what people have around. There's been times if you're watching the podcast and have watched old episodes where people point out there's like an old Game Boy that's on my shelf at my house, which I actually just found at my grandparents a little while ago. And they're like, that's a cool Game Boy. Where did you find that? It's like, because obviously it's like a cherishable thing now. But yeah, seeing everything, getting a little bit of insight onto people's personalities is really cool.
And use that to connect with people, use that to find ways to, just grow and grow your network. Yeah.
So now that I think about it, the title of this episode may shift. I introduced it on how to build your network, but maybe the more accurate title is like the differences of networking during the pandemic versus not the pandemic. So it'll be fancier than that. But I do want to say thank you both for joining me today. This was a great conversation. On the next episode, we're talking about benefits, and we are giving the definitive guide to benefits. So we have Elise Smith, who is our benefits
guru.
Guru, subject matter expert for the company, sat down and gave some really, really great information about benefits. Again, we have already recorded that episode. Sorry to ruin the illusion, but I can promise you it was great. Again, thank you guys for joining me, and I will see everybody next time.